So, but we will be recording. So hopefully that's all right. If you are more comfortable having your camera off while we're recording, that's fine too. It's unlikely that you'll be on the recording. Another Peaceful Valley, Golden Valley. Nathan, 7 months tomorrow. Emerson, 3.5. Golden Valley. Daddy, thank you. Yes, Peaceful Valley, Golden Valley. Your granddaughter. Well, welcome everyone. We have so much to get to, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and get started. But continue to add information into the chat as we go. Put together a little presentation here. Let me grab that for us. Oh, 1 second. Here we go. All right. So I'm so happy to see everybody here. This is a great turnout. Welcome to our very first ever Montessori Moment Live. My name is Jessica Ostrov. I'm the Regional Director of Montessori Education for Endeavor Schools in Minnesota. And we'll talk a little bit more about all of that. But this is a message for you. This is a presentation for parents and families and caregivers. Anyone who has or is related to or knows of a child in any of our schools, I'm so glad to have you with us as we talk about Montessori and what all of that means. Again, my name is Jessica Ostrov. I have been in Montessori for 25 years. My previous school, I was there for 9 years, and this was a school that served toddler through junior high. Not everybody knows that Montessori goes from prenatal all the way through adult. So there are a lot of schools around that serve 0 to 6, like our schools, but there are also schools with elementary Montessori and junior high and even high school. So my son attended Montessori school through 8th grade, and now he's a senior in a public high school. Very excited to go to New Zealand this summer to do a ski instructor internship. And then he may take one direction and come back in time to start college in the fall. He wants to go to Mankato State, Minnesota State College or University in Mankato. For aviation, he wants to be a pilot for Delta, or he may stay in New Zealand for the rest of the season through October and then get a ski instructor internship place, or not internship that at that point, and he'll be a ski instructor in Canada for the winter and then go to school the following year. So I'm all about the gap year. I'm a Montessorian after all. We love immersive learning, and I think that he would learn a lot from going skiing his way across New Zealand and Canada. So my educational background is that my first Montessori diploma is from the Montessori Center of Minnesota. That is at the primary level, or we call it Children's House, preschool, kindergarten. And I taught at that level for about 12 or 13 years. And then I moved into upper elementary. So that is 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, where I stayed for about 6 years. And then I moved into administration. So I did admissions. During COVID, I did 150 individual tours because we had to do everything in group, or not in groups back then. We had to do it individually. So I realized, especially at that point, how much I love to talk about Montessori, because I spoke about it over and over and over and over, and I never got tired of it. So that was a big, really fun job for me, was to do admissions during COVID. And then social media, parent education, all kinds of different ways of supporting the school. And then I moved into my role here at Endeavor Schools, which I'll talk about in a quick second, but I want to finish. I got a horticulture degree from the University of Minnesota, and then that was for my undergrad. And then I went to Hamline University, where I got a master's of education in environmental education. And then I also did MITE, which is Montessori Institute for Teachers Education at Endeavor, from the 0 to 3 level. So my training is a 0 to 3, 3 to 6, but I've also worked in elementary for 6 years and done a lot of administration and helped open the junior high at my previous school. And now I help the adults that work with our children. That is where I get to spend my time uh, supporting our Endeavor staff in all of our schools with Montessori training, systems, materials, whatever else they might need, observation and feedback and support of all kinds. I run our professional development days. It's just honestly my dream job because again, I get to speak about Montessori all day long. That is me and my son. Last year at the Grand Canyon, he's even taller than he already is, taller than me in that picture now, as he's a senior in high school. And then, yes, I joined Endeavor 3 years ago. So November 1st will be my 3-year anniversary. So I'm very, very thrilled to pieces and to be able to work with our 12 schools in Minnesota. And I just really couldn't ask for a more wonderful crew to work with. I love all of them so much. Let me give you a really brief introduction to our broader academic team within Endeavor Schools. So our chief academics officer, a lot of companies have a COO, a CEO, a CFO. We have a CAO, a chief academics officer, and it's Dr. Amy Brereton. She's absolutely brilliant. She has a huge heart. She is full of integrity and is just honestly one of the best people I've ever worked for. More directly, my direct supervisor is Jana Morgan Herman. She's our director of Montessori education coast to coast. And she also runs Mighty, our Montessori training center, Montessori Institute for Teacher Education at Endeavor. And then you see right under Jana is myself and Priya Rajagopalan, who works she does my same job, but on our West Coast, in our West Coast schools. So she's the regional director of Montessori education for the West Coast Endeavor schools. So a really quick sort of outline of what we're going to talk about. We got 3 wonderful parent questions. Oh, and I didn't get to add yours at the end there, the most recent one that we will get to. So it just has 2 of the parent questions, but there is a third about infants. So first, we're going to go through a little bit of background and introduction to Montessori, the Montessori method, how the philosophy informs our classroom life. And then we'll get to our 3 parent questions, which the first one is how can parents be part of fostering Montessori principles in the greater community? And what can the Montessori method teach us about how best to discipline children? And the third question, which is not listed here, is about Montessori infant pedagogy. So we'll get to that as well. Quick background. So the first Montessori Casa dei Bambini, or Children's House, was in Rome in 1907. And the Montessori method is based on 50 years of research and observation by Dr. Maria Montessori, one of the first female medical doctors in Italy in the early 1900s. Back in a time when it was not allowed for females, or not encouraged for females to go and pursue a career in medicine. That was really unheard of at the time. There are a lot of stories about her having to do her schoolwork after hours. She wasn't allowed to be around a cadaver in the presence of men. So she would have to come late in the evening, and she taught herself how to smoke cigars to mask the smell. Sorry to get so graphic, but it's really, I just find those little tidbits so fascinating, and how much life has changed for women in professions like medicine. Her findings are highly influential in all kinds of early childhood programs. In fact, if you can believe it, there did not used to be child-sized furniture in early childhood programs before Dr. Montessori said, hey, why don't we give them chairs and tables that fit them? In her first casa, she even had a staircase that was, shorter steps for the children. So there are Montessori schools in almost every country in the world. And in Minnesota, we have 12 of them. So we have 2 Peaceful Valley Montessori academies, Eden Prairie and Golden Valley. We have 2 Wood Park Montessori schools in Burnsville and Savage. And then we have 8 step-by-step Montessori schools, Brooklyn Park, Chaska, Corcoran, Edina, Maple Grove, Plymouth, St. Anthony, and Wayzata. So let's just dive in here. So the Montessori method is child-centered education. And this is my elevator pitch I give to Uber drivers when I'm on my way to Montessori conferences in other cities. I tell them this: Dr. Montessori flipped the narrative that children are empty vessels that adults need to fill with knowledge. Instead, she uncovered that each human is born with an inner teacher, driving their development, curiosity, and desire to learn, and children actually teach themselves. So this is a very, very important point, that it's not adult directed. This really is about the child and removing obstacles so that their inner teacher can do that most impactful learning. At the top priority is the children's independence, concentration, balancing of freedom and limits, their sense of order. All of these things provide comfort and security. All of our schools are working towards these 5 Montessori essentials. So we want to have a Montessori trained adult in every classroom. This is something that we're working on, and we'll talk about that in a moment, how we're reaching those goals. We want a full set of Montessori materials, and this varies by level. So if you look in a children's house, you'll notice there are a lot of things, a lot of materials, and everything is, scientifically designed. It's very, very intentional. If you go into a toddler environment, it'll look like a scaled back version of a children's house. So you'll still have a lot of materials on the shelves, trays with individual activities, but it'll be a lot more sparse than a children's house. And then when you go into an infant environment, it is space is one of the materials. We want to give the infants a lot of space. We don't want them, swimming in a sea of toys all the time. We want to give them very intentional materials that do different things, and then we rotate them to keep up this development and the interest. We don't want to crowd the infants with a lot of things. So sometimes parents might go into an infant room and say, oh, this feels so empty. What do they do? But it's very intentional that what they have is purposeful, and then it gets rotated over throughout the school year. We want the mixed age grouping. So an infant environment is 0 to 16 months. A toddler environment is 16 to 33 months. Give or take, there's always little variances and things. And then a children's house is 2.5 through kindergarten. And that kindergarten year is very, very important. It's when the bud blossoms all the way open. We all know how much we learn by teaching others, and that mixed age grouping is really part of that. When I gave all those 150 individual tours, I was often asked, how can you have a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old in the same room? And I would always say, we would argue that we really couldn't do it as well without that age grouping, because the way that mentorship teaching works, it benefits both parties. Those older children remember what Dr. Montessori said was cosmically connected to the younger child. They remember what it was like to not be able to tie their shoelaces. They remember what it was like to not be able to maybe pour without spilling a little bit. They have that closer relationship than an adult ever really could. So that's why we have the mixed age groupings. We want child-directed activities. So you may have noticed in your schools, in the past, there was, music, Spanish, all these different classes in the morning. We want to move those to the end of the day so that in the morning, it's all child-directed activities. So the children are free. They have the freedom to choose their work, to choose what they would like to do, and the uninterrupted work time, so they can work on it for as long as they want. A child will potentially not take out a more advanced, sophisticated sequence-based work if they think in their mind, oh, I'm not gonna have time for this. I'm gonna have to clean up for music pretty quickly. I better do something quick and easy, right? So we want to give them this sense of endless time. So that those last two go together, the child-directed activities and uninterrupted work time. So how, we mentioned the first Montessori essential is having a trained Montessori adult in each classroom. And how we are working on that is through various Montessori training opportunities. Montessori takes particular technical training. And so we are often building our own through training and support opportunities, such as a partnership we have with St. Kate's University, where a Montessori staff from our school or an Endeavor staff from one of our schools could go to St. Kate's and earn their AMS, which is American Montessori Society diploma. We have put many people through St. Kate's over the years. We have 5 currently in St. Kate's working towards their children's house AMS diploma. The other opportunity is, like I said, Mighty. That's our very own Montessori Institute for Teacher Education at Endeavor. And that is for a 0 to 3 diploma or a 3 to 6 diploma. And we've got also 5 people in those trainings right now. In fact, Miss Allie, who I think it was on this call, Miss Allie and Miss Ornell from Golden Valley are on this in this program currently, as our 3 other staff in other of our schools, which is so wonderful. We partner with Center for Guided Montessori Studies that does shorter courses, 10-week, 12-week courses. It's kind of the appetizer, getting them ready and prepared to take the next steps to do full Montessori training. We have workshops that we go to at our local Montessori Center of Minnesota, MCM. That's where I actually graduated with my Montessori training. And we have a workshop coming up quickly, actually, in November, that is giving staff support on how to build good bridges between the toddler and the children's house. So a Saturday morning workshop, and most of our schools are sending a toddler guide and a children's house guide and maybe one of the leaders, and could be more, but at the very minimum, it is a toddler guide and a children's house guide going to this workshop on a Saturday. And yes, they are happy to go on a Saturday. You'd think they would want to stay home and rest, but they're excited to go and learn because they know how important that transition from toddler to children's house is. We have professional development days, which we had 2 at the end of August. We have one coming up next Friday, so school is closed, where we're all going to be together and doing a lot of learning and growth. And that is just so important for teachers to have that time so that they can refresh, rejuvenate, and return to school full of inspiration and new ideas for the classrooms. We also have an online platform called Rise, and I've made several trainings on there. We have several more trainings. Those are all free and on demand for our staff. And then I personally go and visit, I observe, and offer consultation for everybody that's in Montessori training and anybody else who requests it. So I make it around to all of our schools pretty much every month. And especially if they have somebody in Montessori training, then I make sure to visit and observe and give them some helpful advice. So as we move more into Montessori theory, we can talk about the Montessori triad. This is consisting of the child, the environment, and the adult, which pairs very nicely with Endeavor's 3 pillars of academics, which means the relational pedagogy. Children don't care what you know. They don't care what you know until they know that you care, right? Inspiring learning environments. We put a lot of energy into our learning environments, and we have a 2-year stint that we're just starting with our academic committee, which has a representative from each of our schools and across Endeavor. So over 100 representatives, one from each school, will gather once a month to learn about inspiring learning environments and take that education back to their classrooms. And then we have developmentally appropriate practice, which in our case means the Montessori method. So we'll break this down just a little bit more. The environment is a teacher in Montessori classrooms. The furniture is placed strategically. It is created to be beautiful and home-like. It shows that we care, but moreover, it really is essential for meeting the needs of children. And we'll talk more about that as well. A room can feel full without feeling cluttered. I mean, as you look at this room, you can tell this is not an infant room. This is not a toddler room. This is a children's house. It is full of carefully placed and carefully designed materials designed to entice the child, to engage that inner teacher. It's called the children's house for a reason. Artwork, as an example, is hung at the child's level because they are the audience. When we hang things up really high to make our rooms beautiful for adults, but the child can't see it, we ask, who is the audience here? We really want to bring things down. We don't want them climbing up on chairs to look at something interesting that was not hung at their level. We want to have uncluttered walls. To adults walking into a room and seeing a lot of blank space around the top, they might think, why is this room so empty? But really everything is intentionally hung low for the child because, again, Casa dei Bambini means children's house. This is their spot. We limit plastic. We want to really focus on natural materials. And all of the things that I'm sharing with you today are principles that you can apply in your own homes as well. We want to limit plastic. We want to give them a really deep sensorial experience of a lot of different types of materials, especially natural materials. wood, metal, ceramics, wicker, textiles, and yes, glass. We show children how to carry glass so carefully and give them the opportunity. Now, does glass sometimes break? Of course. Is that a learning opportunity? Absolutely. So we want to give children things that do have the opportunity to break just because that's the natural consequence, right? And it's amazing how much they really do take pride in being able to use beautiful, fragile things. I will say, and I don't say this to brag, but my son, who's a senior in high school now, for years he's been cooking his own dinners and my dinners and dinners for everyone. He loves cooking, but it's because from a very young age, he was allowed to work with things that were hot, that were sharp, that were fragile. In his Montessori environments, the guides were very carefully showing him how to use those things. And that has translated into a person who loves cooking. And children spend more waking hours at school, if you can believe it, than even at home. So we want the environments to feel cozy and home-like. We design the room so that the materials are accessible, so the children do not need to ask an adult for the things that they need to do their work. This gives children a sense of independence and attracts them to work that they can do for themselves. There is not a lot of going to the adult to ask for this, and this. Everything should be pretty much contained on the tray so that they can independently do their work. And that is something that you can definitely do at home as well, putting everything together in an area so that they can access things like art materials, snack preparation, getting a glass of water, any of those things on their own. Now, what do they need from us, the adults? And this was geared towards our staff. When I do staff trainings, we go through this slide, but it's also, really important for parents as well, if you're interested. So they need us to be humble and respectful of the child, that the child really has something intrinsically motivational within themselves that is moving their development. So when we can understand that, we can step aside and allow them to take the lead within our parameters, right? Within safe parameters. They need us to be knowledgeable in child development. They need us to be observant of small details. If you've ever walked with a toddler and they spot an ant on the ground, you know that that walk is coming to a screeching halt. So because they are observant of small details, they want us to be observant of small details. So we can, again, focus on respecting the young child and their development. They need us to be adaptable, open to new information, which is why I'm so excited to see so many family members here tonight. We talk about being pleasant in appearance. We're not going to be the center of attention. They need us to be orderly. They need us to be hardworking, curious, and optimistic, because above all, we must believe that the child will reveal himself through meaningful work of their choosing. And all that that means is that when a child is met with a material or an activity that speaks directly to that inner teacher, they concentrate, they're calm, they're satisfied, they'll work on something for a long time. That is the revelation of that child. What is interesting to them? What gets their curiosity flowing and their concentration really honed in? That little guy in the blue shirt is my son when he was in Children's House, or maybe at the end of his time in toddler with his friend Lucy in Montessori school. They had a little after school play date at the pizza shop. I always like to stick a little picture of him in my presentations. So what were some of the important discoveries about the child that Dr. Montessori used to help develop this method? Here's what she discovered. Children are born with the inherent desire and capacity to teach themselves. Children are the real teachers as joyful learners and contributors to their community. So you'll often hear us refer to our teachers as the guides. We're just the guides. The children really are their own teachers. We guide them through their day. We guide them. We prepare our environment. We prepare ourselves, but they are the real teachers. So you'll often hear us say, your child's guide, instead of teacher. There's nothing wrong if you say the word teacher. I'm just explaining in case you hear the word guide and you're confused by that. Because children really learn differently than adults by interacting with their environment. So the adult, the child, and the environment, right, the triad, collaborate in development. They spontaneously repeat freely chosen activities according to their individual needs. I wish I could sit like that. My knees would not be happy. Free choice and repetition became the measurement by whether a child's development is being served by a material or if they're just going through the motions to appease the adults, right? They will find something like this child is so into her flower arranging. This is what she's working on right then. I remember running a summer program at a previous school, and we had an outdoor classroom. So the children were working outside. Many of our schools have direct access to the outdoors, and they offer an outdoor classroom throughout the warmer months. And I had a hula hoop out there, and a child that just loved to roll that hula hoop back and forth and back and forth. And he did it for 45 minutes. And there's literally no way I could have said, your job now is to roll this back and forth for 45 minutes. That's something that only comes from inside themselves. That comes from their inner teacher driving their development. So he was not just rolling a hula hoop, as simple as that sounds. He was learning about balance, equilibrium, gravity, speed, friction, all of those things. Those are the precursors for his scientific brain when he gets into those older classes. Super important that we allow children to have the opportunity to explore until they exhaust themselves. Because children exhibit a sense of peace after having worked with the material for as long as they wanted. So this young lady is putting her toothpicks in that vinegar jar through that tiny little hole. To her, this is the only thing happening in the world. She doesn't notice or mind that there's a chair out of order, there's a child behind her, the light could be on or off. She's so focused. And those are the moments where we want to imagine a protective concentration bubble around a child, and we'll only interrupt them if we absolutely have to. But otherwise, that's a moment that needs to be protected and preserved. She's right there with it, concentrating and learning in that moment. When we talk about discipline, and we had a question about this, we'll talk more about this afterwards, so more on this during the parent discussion question, but children do not respond long-term to rewards and punishments. So we never use sticker charts or traditional timeouts. We want it to be intrinsic. Whatever they're doing, any sort of discipline is coming from inside themselves instead of us imposing it on them, because we won't always be there to impose it on them. They need to develop it from within themselves. So we look at discipline in terms of a natural consequence. For example, if a child is continually behaving dangerously, she would be invited to work next to an adult for some time and then given a fresh start afterwards. We always believe in the best of them. They are growing and developing every single day. They're not the same person they were yesterday, and they won't be the same person tomorrow. So we want to give them all a fair, brand new start each time. Each day, it's a fresh day. I love this one. I love the theory of maximum effort, that children, and I'm sure you've all seen this with your children, that they often attempt tasks that they haven't built the strength or balance for yet. For example, this time of year, they want to try to pick up that pumpkin that weighs as much as they do. And we must not interfere until they've exhausted themselves. Interrupting them extinguishes the fire that's driving them to keep trying. And this is just incredible to me. Human infants are the only species on Earth that cannot move or communicate like the adults of their species within moments of their birth. So the process of development that occurs instead of walking and talking is profound. Infants make 1 million brain connections every second in their first year of life. That's a massive responsibility and opportunity and privilege to be around children during that rapid of development. It's pretty incredible. I put this one in here for my friends with toddlers. So toddlers have an intrinsic desire to exert maximum effort and go up. We want to recognize that by climbing on tables or chairs, they're not trying to be naughty. We don't want to let them do that, but they're not doing it to push our buttons. They have a deep need to climb to build their strength and coordination. So we really want to find ways to saying yes to climbing in safe and appropriate ways. That's why we want to, we're still working on putting some sort of climbing equipment in each of our toddler environments, but it is something that could be outdoors like this, and also have some, this is called a pickler triangle. We have a lot of pickler triangles in our classrooms, in our toddler environments. Dr. Montessori recognized the importance of the senses in developing the intelligence. You might notice that none of our schools have sensory bins. We have the entire environment is prepared intentionally to be a sensorial experience. So this young lady has a cold glass vase. She probably got a little bit wet as she was pouring the water through the metal funnel into the vase. She felt what it was like to snip that stem with a pair of clippers or scissors. She was looking at all the parts of a flower, smelling it, examining it. These are the sensorial experiences. We want them tied to something real, something purposeful and meaningful to them. And so we intentionally prepare the environment with all of these different types of materials, as we talked about before, for this reason. And we have a whole section of our classroom that is a sensorial material section that you learn all about when you go through Montessori training. But you'll see those materials are the same in every single Montessori school across the whole planet. You'll see a pink tower in every children's house across the world. There's a lot of other materials as well that you'll find everywhere around the world. And I really encourage you as you travel to visit Montessori schools in other places, especially other countries. It's one of my most favorite things to do. You'll see that they're all set up the same way, but have slight cultural differences, which I just think is so fascinating. As we talked about before, we want to have blocks of unstructured time. So we advise our staff to refrain from pulling children away from activities that they're engaged in. That's why we wanted to have that feeling of endless time while we moved our specialist classes towards the end of the day, and allowed for a full 2.5 to 3 hours in the morning for Children's House, about an hour and a half or so for toddler. And then infants, of course, well, their work time is all day long. They're always doing something, exploring something. So we want to protect their concentration like a fragile bubble. That's the cornerstone of their development. This is tricky for a lot of us. Dr. Montessori cautioned adults against serving children, right? We don't need to dress them head to toe. We don't need to spoon feed them. We don't need to, you know, keep them younger than they are. I know that's hard. We love our babies, and we do it out of love. But what she wrote in her book, and bear in mind, this is translated from more than 100 years old Italian, so don't be offended by this. She said, when children are not given the chance to do things that they are capable of, they remain incompetent. Moreover, they fought them when they were older. They fought doing them. So we must include them with care of themselves and the environment from the beginning. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later too, how to just develop that culture in your home. She talked about personal dignity being of huge importance to the children. And as adults, we must understand and recognize this. We train our staff not to just swoop down and pick up babies without making contact with them, reaching out your hands to them, having them reach their hands up to you, making a connection, remembering that they are a human individual, not widgets in a factory, right? We want to treat them like human beings. When we're putting food before them, we don't just drop it down in front of everybody, right? We want to say, we wouldn't do that at a dinner party, right? With your guests, just drop down a plate of food in front of them. We want to really make a connection with them in all of those moments. This is what we mean when we say there's no Montessori time and then the rest of the day. The whole day is infused with Montessori principles like that. There's a couple misconceptions about Montessori. We believe in freedom within limits. So at one end of the spectrum, people say, oh, Montessori is just so loosey-goosey, they can do whatever they want all day long. That is not exactly true. Also, some folks might think, oh, the guidelines are so strict, everything has to be just so. And that's not exactly true either. So there's this balance of freedom within limits. We have a place for everything and everything in its place, but that is not to be strict. It's so that children feel comfortable and secure and know where to find the things that they need. So that's a really important distinction. And yes, they have freedom to choose their activities, but they may not be developmentally ready for some materials, and therefore they need to build up to that. And so there are these different guardrails that are built in, but we do want to say yes much more than we have to say no. Really, it's like a guitar string. If it's too tight, it will snap, and it also will sound terrible if it is too loose. So classroom life, how do Dr. Montessori's findings influence the way that our staff work with children? So one example is, like we talked about, we provided child-sized furniture throughout our rooms. Most of the rooms have 2 sizes per level because, a child that is staying in a children's house from 33 months to 6 years old, those are radically different sized children. So we want to have furniture that fits their bodies. Toddlers literally double in age the time that they're in the toddler community from 16 months to 32 months. So we want to make sure that they have furniture that fits their body as well. Most of our classrooms have gotten rid of their high chairs and their feeding tables, and we moved to low to the ground weaning tables. And even in the infant rooms, we'll have 2 sizes. One will be with, something between their legs and a seat belt for those that we're worried that they might slip under the table. They're not really secure sitters yet, but as soon as they're able to walk, they are able to sit down at another chair at a different table that doesn't have all those security measures because it's not necessary. We want to remove obstacles and supports as early as we can to allow for that growth and independence. We don't want to hold them back from their development. That's really an important piece of Montessori. Because infants and toddlers need opportunities to practice their 3 big tasks. Their adaptation, so they're adapting to their time and their place. They're like fish in an aquarium. The water that they're in is what they're going to be adapted to. So we want to make sure that that environment is healthy and supportive of their development. And then their language skills and their motor skills. So we want freedom of movement, and we want to use real language with the children. We have a couple slides on each level. So, it's interesting to learn about whether or not your child's at either any of these levels. But for 0 to 16 months, caregiving is not seen as a custodial task. These are the opportunities for education. So diapering, feeding, napping, it's done with a sense of care for the child's dignity. And those, again, are the educational opportunities. We are present with them. We're sports casting what we're doing. This is a wipe. I will use it to wipe your bottom. It's wet. It might feel a little bit cold. Would you like to feel it on your hand? Giving them language to what's really happening, that is going to be more impactful than any finger puppet play that we could do. We want to give them real language for real activities for the world around them. And we involve them in their care. For example, infants are allowed to hold a spoon during feeding. They are given a more appropriate amount of time to work through struggles without interfering too soon. We involve them in dressing themselves as best that we can. We want to minimize the use of containers. So research shows how exercisers, bumbo seats, swings, cribs, feeding tables, etc., are a hindrance to physical and emotional development. 12 months and up, the infants can begin sleeping on floor beds or cots. Before that, we are careful not to leave infants in their cribs any longer than they're sleeping. Not only does it limit their freedom of movement, but when they're looking out at the world through slats of a crib, that can really disorient them. I remember being on a balcony and looking through the slats of the railing and just getting such a headache. And when I stood up and looked at the world unhindered, it immediately went away. And I think about that with our infants whose vision are developing. If they're able to walk, they should freely join the weaning table for eating. And like we said before, the seats with straps are used only for safety, never for restraint. And we want to find ways to allow infants freedom of movement outdoors. A lot of our schools are working on building beautiful outdoor environments or being able to take the infants outside in sections of our existing outdoor spaces. So toddlers 16 to 33 months, this is where we talk about functional independence. We want to give them ample time for pulling pants up and down, putting on shoes, flipping on their coat, toilet learning. Toddlers make messes and they need the opportunity to clean it up themselves. This is the age where they want to. If we wait too long and we've been doing it for them all this long time, why would they want to? So seize that opportunity where they are interested and willing, joyfully willing. Show them how with tools that are their size. So toilet learning, this is the ultimate care of self. And we want to really start earlier rather than later. It will be light years easier to do it earlier. And I'm talking as soon as they can walk, they can sit on a potty. Partner with us. You can send thick cotton underwear, follow through at home. Society has us believing that children will let us know and that it can't be done until much later, or that it can't be done until much later than research and experience proves. As soon as they can walk, they can begin to control their lower half. We might be holding their development back by waiting, and you know who benefits are the diaper companies that are making so much money off of keeping children in diapers much longer than they need to. And like I said, it just gets so much harder the longer that you wait. So we should be starting right away in the toddler room at 16 months, and it just becomes part of the daily routine. It is not unusual to be complete by 18 months. Much faster if it happens at home as well. But I always tell my teachers, just start, because it can be really amazing what they can do at school. And then the parents will see they're doing that at school. I bet we can do this at home. This is how we partner together to do things that we just didn't know was possible before. It's really exciting stuff. So then we get to Children's House. And again, that's 33 months through kindergarten. This is a program that is designed to be 3 years. Now, they'll have a wonderful experience if they're just in Children's House for 2 years, but I cannot express enough how powerful that third year is, that kindergarten year. And we, of course, understand that's an expense, but if it's able to be swung, it's really, really just so incredibly important and impactful what happens in that third year. So help me to help myself. This is when independence soars to new heights as they've gained language and motor skills. We must show them how to do things and then give them time and freedom to do things. Peace education is woven throughout, and avoiding conflict is not the goal, but more importantly, showing children how to approach conflict with compassion and problem solving. Grace and courtesy lessons are given before conflict arises to be used as a point of reference when needed. So we talk about conflicts that might come up. You know, a child's using a material and another child wants it. If we've talked about it beforehand, how do you know when that material is available? Oh, right. When you find it back on the shelf, that's when you know it's available. Then in those moments where we do have a push-pull, we can say, this is just like what we were talking about. Remember, how do we know when a material is available? Oh, that's right. It's when it's back on the shelf. It is a balance of independence and interdependence. Interdependence meaning that the children can rely on each other. So Montessori materials are designed to be shown and then freely chosen. And when the guide is presenting materials to a child, we protect this presentation by redirecting children to ask questions to see if the child can solve their own problem or find a friend to support them. We really want them to start believing in themselves and being resourceful. How can I find other people, my peers, who can help me with this? Want to allow these following freedoms: freedom to communicate. So the classroom is not meant to be a silent space. Freedom of movement. We don't give assigned workspaces. Children are able to move freely about the classroom. Dr. Montessori had a vision in her mind of an educational environment where children were purposefully walking around all day long. Movement. And free choice. We don't have a requirement for each child. You have to do XYZ before you can do this. No, the choice is desired because the enticement is through the beauty of the material and the need within themselves that it satisfies. They can work with the material for as long as they like. It could be 5 minutes or 50 minutes. And we intentionally have only one of almost everything. This is to move away from a scarcity mindset and help development of the will or patience. They can choose where to work, at a table, or you might hear the word chowky. That means a low floor table. Their child sits right at the floor and there's a little raised table for them to work at, or a working mat. They can work at an individual workspace or next to a friend. You might see a lot of individual tables set up, but they also have chowkies and floor mats that they can move however they want. But we do want to offer them a lot of independent workspaces so they can really develop that concentration. And again, their workspace is freely chosen. It's not assigned by the adult. So if they choose an individual table, they want to have that space for their own work. And some activities are more appropriate for certain workspaces. We wouldn't do food work on the floor, for example, or we wouldn't do red rods, which are very long, on a table. They just wouldn't fit. So how do we know when it's time to intervene? Observation is the main tool that we use. So the Montessori method is a science and an art. So we take observations, we jot them down, what brings out the most concentrated child, what is a trigger for them that might upset them, how can we see where they are in the progression of materials and keep moving them through just when they're ready, not too late and not too early. And we try not to intervene unless we see one of the 4Ds, because children can often solve their own conflicts much better than an adult ever could. So we want to intervene, of course, if it's dangerous to themselves or others, if it's damaging to the materials or the environment, if it's disruptive to the point where other children are not able to do their work, if they take a material from a child that's working on it, for example. But we do want to allow them socialization, but we don't want them disrupting so much that the child can't do their work. And we would not allow demeaning conversation, speaking in a way that does not protect dignity and respect. So now, we've got a little time left, so I'm glad. Moving on to our parent question. So parent question number 1, how can parents be part of fostering Montessori principles in the greater community? I would say the number 1 thing is to lead by example. Parents will notice the children are calmer, the children are more engaged, the children are less drawn to screens and more drawn to real activities when we allow them to do that, when we give them access to, I love this picture for this time of year, pumpkins and gourds and, pumpkin patches, apple orchards, all of those amazing places are so full of sensory experiences, purposeful sensory experiences for children. We want to advocate when possible for children and amplify community successes. You may have been in a supermarket that has a little cart for young children. Tell them that you appreciate that. You might be in a library that has a lower water fountain for children. Let them know that you appreciate that so that children can have freedom and access those things themselves. And they know that someone, they won't necessarily cognitively think about it, but in some way deep down, they'll know that this was designed for them, right? You don't necessarily see a 6-foot adult pushing that little tiny cart. You might, but that would make a great story. Share what you know, start a book club. These make great shower gifts. So all of our schools should have all 3 of these books in them: the Montessori Baby, the Montessori Toddler, and the Montessori Child. These are amazing books for you to have at home as references. You can look up a topic and open right up to it. They're beautifully illustrated. I highly recommend these 3 books. And then organize meetups at places that support Montessori principles, like apple orchards, sledding, all these wonderful things in Minnesota. We can take advantage of our 4 seasons. Parent question number 2. So what can the Montessori method teach us about how to best discipline children? This is a great question. We don't really think about discipline in a traditional sense because, as we talked about on a previous slide, intrinsic motivation always trumps extrinsic motivation. We do need it to come from inside themselves. We can't coerce them. We won't be there to coerce them the rest of their lives. So we need to have it come from within themselves, not to get a pizza party, not to get a star on a sticker chart, right? Or not to avoid getting in trouble, right? It goes both ways. These books are fantastic. Punished by Rewards by Alfie Kohn is a classic. Positive Discipline. This is very much used in Montessori schools a lot. Bringing Up Bebe. That book came out. It was a sensation. I loved reading it when my child was young. We think about natural consequences instead of arbitrary punishment. So if my child wouldn't put his shoes on, I'm sorry, we can't leave the house until your shoes are on. I guess we're not going to the park. It's just how it goes. If it's winter and the child will not put their coat on, we still need to get to school. It's going to be pretty cold. but I guarantee you no one's going to freeze into a popsicle. They need to feel that response to the environment. If they don't do what we're telling them to do for their health and safety, we always want to keep them safe. But if it's a matter of them just being cold for a minute and feeling uncomfortable, wow, I really should have put on my coat. This is really cold. That's so important for them to experience that. It's much better for them to experience that than to work into a power struggle over putting on a coat. No incentives are needed. We just create a culture where this is just what we do. We've never had sort of chores or chore charts or any of that sort of thing. It's just, children, like I said, the younger they are, the more they want to be involved. Embrace it. Take the time. Will the laundry be folded in the way that looks a little different than you might have? Yes. But I guarantee you, I haven't done my son's laundry since he was in about second grade, because as long as he can operate, these children can operate iPads, they can certainly operate washing machines, even if they need a stool to get up there. And now when he goes off to college or skiing over on the other side of the planet, it will not even be a thing where he wouldn't know how to do his laundry. You want to raise humans that are going to make good living partners for roommates and, partners at some point. It's really, we want to create self-sufficiency. It's joyful, I promise. And then it'll be not this big struggle when they're 8 or 9 or 10, all of a sudden they're expected to do these chores where we don't even really think of them as chores. It's just what we do to take care of our home, right? Or to take care of our classroom at school. Want to provide consistency. So, but to many adults that are taking care of these children, we want to really have as much of the consistency as possible. We want them to be able to predict we don't want to have our temperament be all over the place. Right? So how can we be predictably calm for them, and a predictable schedule? I remember when my son was a toddler and the whole weekend was divided into quarters: before nap on Saturday, after nap on Saturday, before nap on Sunday, after nap on Sunday. And if I messed with that, asking for trouble. We want to avoid shaming, of course, and acknowledge and apologize when we lose our cool. I will say to my son, Nico, I'm so sorry that I snapped or I was short with you. I want you to know it wasn't about you. I was stressed about this other thing. We really wanted to raise children understanding how to take responsibility for themselves. It's very important. Parent question number 3 comes from our friend from Corcoran here. So what does Montessori practice look like in the infant room and how to support it at home? Well, the way it is in the infant room is easy to mimic at home. So it's all about the independence in eating. So we would like to give them a low chair at a low table. What I did when my child was young is I would take the tray off of the high chair and move him right up to the table. So he was eating involved at the table with the rest of us. Not just, off to the side, that he's really part of it. Using real dishes and silverware. It's so, replace those plastic spoons with actual metal spoons. All that plastic that goes in their mouth, let's give them real things, and that will help them connect with their environment in a much more meaningful way. Drinking from open cups. We don't need things like sippy cups or, plates that suction cup to the table. I know that that's convenient for the adults, but it does really take away the opportunity for the child to learn how to handle those things. And this little cup that this child is using only holds about 2 ounces of water. If it spills, which it probably will, it's not that big of a mess to clean up. So it's okay to make a little mess. It's really important, actually. Involvement in changing. So we want to talk the child through the process, allow them to be involved. They can hold their diaper when they're able. They can pull up and down their pants. In our classrooms, many of our classrooms have a low changing platform that the children can walk over and lie down independently. And then toilet learning, we can start that again as soon as they can walk. And then continuing on, sleeping on a floor bed or cot at 12 months, the children are allowed to. This might feel a little radical at home. We're really used to having cribs. No judgment whatsoever if you have cribs, but it is really nice to just make the room a safe space with a baby gate at the door, allow them that freedom of movement to sleep on a mattress on the floor. And then when they wake up, they can just get up and go get a little book or a toy or something, and they don't have to wait and cry and wait for an adult to come get them. That is a personal choice. Again, no judgment whatsoever. Just saying that this is something you can do. It's okay. And then care of the environment, we want to involve them in that. Make little small, small little dustpan and brush sets and cloths available so children can clean up their spills, both their own and others, and involve them in caring for pets and plants. It's really important to give them living things to nurture, even just a little plant with like a little watering can, or let them help put the food in for the fish or the dog. It really does help them in their growth. Oh, and we're getting right towards the end here, just in time. So I hope that those answered your questions. And I'll open this up for questions more in a second, but I'll just go through the last few slides here. Dr. Amy Brereton, who I said is our CAO, Chief Academics Officer, she is doing a workshop, or not workshop, but like a presentation like this on October 17th. So that is just next week on Thursday, 6:30 p.m. You can register with this QR code. This is not a Montessori focused presentation, but the power of play is universal, and I'd highly recommend it. And then coming up in November, you're going to see a Montessori in the Home presentation with Jana Morgan Herman, a presentation that I put together. She will be narrating and going through, and we will have the registration ready for that in a bit. And then we will have another one of these Montessori Moment lives in January and one in April. So keep your eye on your newsletter and your emails from your school leaders to submit your questions. And then I will include them in the presentation. And at the end of my presentations, I always use this quote, which I just love. It is actually from Mahatma Gandhi. He wrote this to Dr. Montessori in 1931. So after World War I, but before World War II, he said, "Madam, you have very truly remarked that if we are to achieve real peace in this world, and if we are to carry on a real war against war, we shall have to begin with the children. And if they will grow up in their natural innocence, we won't have the struggle. We won't have to pass fruitless, idle resolutions, but we shall go from love to love and peace to peace, until at last all of the corners of the world are covered with that peace and love, for which, consciously or unconsciously, the whole world is hungering." And, Montessori education at its core is peace education, helping children to become independent and interdependent, knowing deeply what it means to be part of a community, and have love for all living creatures, and the world around us. So I really want to thank you. And I know we're right at the ending point, but I'd be happy to stay on and chat with you if you have anything that you'd like to discuss. Let's see. Do we still have everyone with us? I couldn't really see you when I was presenting. So, yep. And this is recorded, so I will be able to share this with the school leaders who can then send it out to the families. Is there any other, I hope that was helpful. Thank you, Madison. Thank you, Amanda. Thanks, Megan. But I'm happy if you'd like to unmute and ask a question. Or hopefully I will see you in the next time around. Thank you, everyone.
I have a question quick, if there's still time.
Absolutely.
My husband and I have been listening. We are new to Montessori. We have a daughter now who's in Children's House. And we were commenting on, can you give more examples of some of the natural consequences of things and how to support in the situations where it seems like we would otherwise, no, don't do that, or how do we support this ourselves at home?
Such a good example. That's such a good question. Absolutely. So let's take an example of a child, spills their drink and then they just want to leave it and go play, right? So the natural consequence would be, we really can't go play until we take care of our responsibility here, and make the cloths in a little basket readily available. It's not that they have to ask for the materials that they need. Everything is just there. And that again becomes part of the culture of the home, right? That we do take responsibility for our own messes. And that goes into what Dr. Montessori said about not being servants to children, that we're there to guide them, just like we call ourselves guides in our classrooms, but that we allow them the opportunity to follow all the way through the cycle of an activity before they move on to another activity. So I know, of course, that this isn't always possible. Sometimes you got to get out the door and you don't have time. But when you have time, take the time to just wait. It requires a lot of patience and consistency. It can't just be sometimes we expect it and other times, oh, it's no big deal, we'll take care of it, right? They won't respond well if they don't, on a subconscious level, know that that is the next thing you do after you make, a spill. There's no shame in it. We all make mistakes, we all make spills, but we clean it up before we move on to something else. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? And it takes practice and it takes time. So give yourself grace and ease into it, but I guarantee you the younger that you start, the easier it will be. Trying to impose new chores and new responsibilities later, it's very difficult. It's not worth giving up on though. It's definitely not worth giving up on. But it is really, when the stakes are higher, when they get older, when they're, driving or they are going out with friends, all of those things that happen sooner than you might think when you've got young children that seem so far away. But if they already have it built in that they follow through, that they take responsibility, that they do have a sense of respect for you and themselves and their environment and their belongings. The expectation is that they'll hang up their coat when they get home, not just drop it on the floor. Put their shoes where they go instead of just kicking them off, right? We have those systems in place that will really help develop that sense of order within them, and it will translate into all these opportunities that where the stakes get higher and higher as they get older, and then eventually become adults where the stakes are a lot higher. Yeah, so hopefully that's helpful. Alrighty. Thank you so much. And don't forget to make it cute and fun, We'll put it in a cute basket, have them, it be something that's enticing, something that they want to touch, they want to get involved in. That will really, really help get those systems in place. All right. I'll be signing off, but be sure to email me if you have any questions. It's my email's out there, so I hope to speak with you soon. Bye-bye.